This week on Muy Criollo, we'll be talking about that iconic seafood soup of Guayaquil, Encebollado. Onion is in the name, and together with good quality fish, they are the stars that make this dish work. If I had to give this dish a difficulty rating, I'd say it's barely a 2 out of 5, just because it's so easy to overcook fish. But as long as you're aware of that risk, it's pretty easy to avoid. Now, where does a good soup start? With good quality bones. Good bones make good stock, or bone broth as the kids call it. Buying a whole fish and separating the bones from the meat is the way to go. I've got some pompano that I filleted, but almost any white fish will do, such as flounder or snapper. You can, of course, ask your fishmonger to do this for you. Place your fish bones in about a gallon of water and let's add some aromatics. Onion, celery, parsnip, cilantro stems, and crushed black pepper. Now, you can change that up if you want. This is just what I prefer for a good all-purpose fish stock that you can use for any kind of soup. I strongly recommend not adding any salt to stock. Season the soup itself later. Let that simmer for 45 minutes to an hour. Now, fish out the fish and all the vegetables you can grab. Now you see why I cut them into such large pieces. This will make it much easier to strain. Make sure your bowl is slightly chipped and just barely big enough to hold your stock. Now you can put that in the fridge to cool or use it immediately, whatever suits your schedule. Now that we have a good quality stock to serve as our foundation, let's actually start our soup. Onions are the signature ingredient here, so let's start with very thinly slicing 2 red onions. Put those aside and let's dice half a white onion, peel some celery, which gets rid of those annoying fibers, and dice it. Dice half a green pepper, and dice 1 plum tomato. Finally, we need some garlic. Now you can mince this, but I personally really like to slice it very thin and throw it in. Either way, you'll need 3 cloves. Next, let's cut some yuca. Yuca, or cassava, or manioc if you're the type of person who spends $8 on chopped cheese, is this giant frickin' root. So honestly, 1 is more than enough. Peel it like a swole potato because that's what it is. There's nothing scientific about that statement, but you know it's true. Look at this unit. Take your hunk of pure starch and cut him up into more manageable sections. Then start chopping into pieces small enough to reasonably fit on your puny little spoon. By the way, one sad fact about yuca, to those who haven't eaten it before, is that sometimes it's got these thick fibers inside, and there's really no easy way to get them out. It's kind of just part of the experience. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room. If you're Guayaquileño, you would probably stop watching in disgust if I didn't mention this fish, Albacore. Now, Albacore is a special type of tuna because it's the kind that goes in the cans you see everywhere. Now, in Guayaquil, this fish is everywhere. But the thing is, most fresh tuna you see in markets is your highbrow, highfalutin yellowfin tuna, not the working man's albacore. So, in my soup, I opted for a compromise. I'll be using other fresh fish and supplementing it with canned albacore. At least my cans are Ecuadorian. Thank you, Capitan Real. For the fresh fish, I'll be using the pompano and some bass. I kind of forgot I was using 2 fish here and had to pull out a different cutting board, but you don't have to do that. In fact, I recommend against it. Once our fish is cut, store it in the fridge. And start juicing lemons. You're going to want about 4 to 5 depending on how big they are. Strain the juice and pour it onto the red onions from earlier. Make sure they're completely covered, and add a generous amount of salt, and mix them around. Set those aside for half an hour. Now, in a pot, let's sweat the garlic in some vegetable oil on low heat. Once that's been sizzling for a bit, let's add the rest of our veggies, the onion, celery, bell pepper, and tomato. Season with salt, pepper, cumin, and some chili powder. Let them sweat, then add the stock and the yuca. While that simmers, let's strain our onions. What we've basically done is a quick pickle, and how far you want to go is up to you. The longer they sit, the stronger they get. I marinate them for only half an hour. Whenever you decide to stop them, rinse with water to halt the pickling process, and drain excess liquid with a paper towel. These are ready, so let's put them aside while we finish our soup. Once the yuca is tender, add the raw fish to the soup. Just let that cook for about a minute. Check the seasoning, taste it, never be afraid of seasoning. If it needs more salt, more pepper, or cumin, now is the time to add it. Now, after draining and rinsing our albacore, we can add that in as well, just so it warms up. And get ready to serve. Ladle in your soup and garnish with a generous helping of the marinated onions. And a sprinkle of chopped cilantro. Now, this is a soup classic in its simplicity. The marinated onions carry the typical citrus bite to balance out the seafood soup. And they look good too. There's really nothing else I can say except buen provecho. As always, ingredient lists are in the description. Stay safe out there, or inside there, and I'll see you all next week.